Hello friends, well, it's been an interesting week to say the least. As you guys know, when I started this channel, I had a lot of different things that I wanted to do with regards to music, teaching guitar, talking about different things, musical, sharing my experiences, reaction videos. But one of the things that I always knew I wanted to do was to do interviews and talk to big names in the music industry. This video today is a big one. This video is for me, for a number of reasons. I knew while my channel was still small, but I got to a point a while ago I thought, I have enough subscribers now, I can start approaching people that I'd like to interview in the music business. And you have to look at it from a lot of different things. Is this someone that I can have a good flowing conversation with? Does this person, are they well spoken? Do they have a passion for what it is that they do? I don't know if you guys really watch, maybe when you're a YouTuber it's a little different, but when you watch different interviews on different YouTube channels with celebrities or people in certain industries, some of them aren't always that good, but I wanted to do a really good job. And being a fan, you guys know that I love and appreciate all different types of music. I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for thrash metal. And I've been a huge Megadeth fan since the mid-'80s. I was quite young when I first got into Megadeth. And I was always impressed over the years by their bass player, David Ellefson. How well spoken he is, how passionate he is about music. And he just always in his interviews came across as just a really good dude. Really good person to talk to. So a few weeks ago I reached out to his management. I knew I wanted him to be the first person that I do an interview with. And we set up a time. And interestingly, the day before, I got extremely sick and I tested positive for COVID. But I would be bound and determined to not lose my chance to talk with David Ellefson. So this is a big one for all of you out there who love thrash music. I think you're really going to like it. I came at it from a different angle because a lot of these people get asked the same questions over and over. So I tried to use my background as a musician, as a fan, to ask different types of questions that maybe he wouldn't normally be used to being asked. No matter what, this being my first interview with a big name in the music industry, being medicated to the hilt, of course you have these, despite being a confident person, I had these voices in the back of my head going, what if he just doesn't like you? What if you ask him a question that offends him? Or I always knew in my gut that it would just be a great conversation. And even up to the moment of the arranged time when he joined the room for the Zoom meeting, for the Zoom chat, I had those voices in the back of my head. Oh, what if you blow it? What if this means the end of your channel? What if he doesn't like you and tells all the other metal musicians out there that he knows, do not do interviews with this guy? David was great. He has a wealth of knowledge musically. He's had his own trial and tribulations. And it was just an absolute joy. And when you're a Megadeth fan and you're a musician, it's always going to come out sooner or later. Friends, David was extremely gracious and extremely generous with his time. I could not say enough good about him. Here it is, formerly of Megadeth, now with the Lucid, Dieth, number of other projects, as well as the Kings of Thrash tour with former Megadeth guitar player Jeff Young. Here is my interview with David Ellefson. Friends, Brian here for Yes You Can Play Guitar, and it is my absolute honor to have on our show today Mr. David Ellefson, formerly of Megadeth, of the band Lucid, of the band Dieth, and many other projects. Welcome, sir, for being here today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm going to try not to fanboy it. I'm going to be honest with everybody, as everyone knows with my channel. One of my dreams would have been to actually audition for or even jam with Megadeth back in the day. If Mr. Ellefson would have said, here's a tire iron, that guy owes me money, get the money from him and I'll let you get up and do a song, I'd say, which limbs do you want broken and in what places? I would have done it. But
that's the right attitude.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here today. Just to get going, you're a really busy guy. I couldn't get over how much stuff you got going on. Now, did I read recently that you did a reunion with your first band, Taz, from Minnesota?
I did. So here's how it started. So, the little town of Jackson, Minnesota. So picture the county fair. If you've seen the Reese Witherspoon movie, what was it, where actually grew up in Alabama, she went to New York, and then she came back to Alabama, and there's like a county fair.
Legally Blonde.
That is it.
Yeah.
How did I know that? Yeah, I don't know, whatever one it was, but yeah, that is it. I mean, Jackson and the county fair was a staple every year. I was in 4-H, so I used to work at the 4-H hamburger stand, doing that deal. My father, when he was growing up, he was in 4-H and FFA, and so he exhibited cattle and things like that. And so I was in woodworking, so I exhibited like a toolbox that me and my dad built, and got a blue ribbon for it, which was cool. So they invited me back to give a talk to the people, and I've been back there doing things with my coffee store and various things over the years. So they asked me to speak, and then they said, "Hey, would you mind putting your band Taz back together, like your high school band?" And I said, "Sure." I said, "We're all in touch, and everybody looks good, and I think still plays good. So let's see what we can do." And so we met in Mankato for a couple of days, and we rehearsed, and then we went down and we did the show Friday nights. And just like every band, it's not only the songs, it's like, we got to have a set, we got to have a backdrop and merch, and it's all this. And I love that we think like that, because to us, our heroes were Kiss. How do we be Kiss? Like, that's the deal. And I think that's still in our hearts. So when you say you're a fan, I mean, God bless you. I hope you are, because we're all fans, and that's what still gets me on that stage is I'm just a fan of music. And the funny thing is we played the same set list we played 40 years ago, right? And 40 years ago, the Green Manalishi and Whole Lotta Rosie, and these songs, these were like very dangerous, cutting edge, very heavy metal songs, right? Now they're just bar standards. Like, every band plays these, right? Yeah. So it was kind of fun to just play the same songs we played so many years ago, and now actually everybody knows them. Even in Jackson, Minnesota, they know them. It's just largely a kind of a country and western region, the farmers and stuff, but the people there are lovely. It just reminds me, when I go back there now, how lucky I am to have grown up there. The Ellefson farm, there's a box out, like a chest, like a steamer trunk out in the shed on the family farm there. And it's 1878 Anders Ellefson, Ellevsen, right? They changed it to O-N, they changed the V to an F. So when they came over from Helso, Norway, this trunk is out there, and my nephew and I were talking about, we preserve this trunk at all costs. Like, this is the holy grail of the Ellefson namesake. And that's where they came over to Jackson and bought the first piece of land, and the farm started. The Ellefson farm was established 1881. So I mean, I just think about how cool it is to come from that legacy, so as cool as it is to have a heavy metal legacy of my own, which is, what I've done, it's just as cool to come from that legacy, that I had nothing to do with. None of us have any say in who, what, when, and where, to whom we're born. But I'm very blessed that I was born there and to my family.
Well, in my own personal opinion, I think it says a lot about you. How many people with your background in music would go back and play with the original band? Like, how many people do it? You never hear that.
Well, it was funny because, you know, me and Greg, so the guitar player, Greg Handevitt, he and I moved to
yes.
LA. We moved to LA together. We knocked on our neighbor's door to buy some beer and cigarettes. Turns out it was Dave Mustaine, and we did not know him. We did not know of this band he was talking about that he had just come out of called Metallica, because they hadn't hit the Midwest. You know, back in those days, news traveled slow through music magazines, radio and stuff. But we got a quick study on that. And, you know, the reality of it is, you know, me and Greg are the other founders of Megadeth. You know, it was Greg's idea to call the band Megadeth based on this song that Dave had called No Survivors, that had the line in it, the arsenals of Megadeth can't be rid, they said. It's basically Set the World Afire is the song that's on So Far So Good Sweat. So, I mean, Greg was there with me on the downbeat. And, you know, I got to say, you know, Greg, as much as he was only there a couple of months, and then, you know, me and Dave moved on and had other members and, you know, continued on with Megadeth, and Greg went to the Navy, and now he became a lawyer and went back to Minnesota. You know, the reality of it is, you know, who knows if any of us would have ever been heard from, you know, Dave ever, who knows if he, you know, I certainly think that, you know, he got a second shot at it because of me and Greg. You know, and I know 100% for sure, I'm thankful for meeting Dave, because that gave me my shot, you know, and Greg is always thankful that I bring him into the story, because he is part of the story. He was there, you know, he was the other guy. So, you know, I think it's important we all remember how lucky we were in June of 1983 that we met, because all of our lives would have probably been very different had that not happened. And, you know, that kind of comes from the good Lord above, lead two kids from Jackson, Minnesota out there, and, you know, meet Dave, and that happens. But you're right, to go to Hollywood and beyond and have that journey and win a Grammy and go back to Jackson, call my buddies up. Well, it was awesome, man. I'm not gonna lie.
Who does that? I think that says a lot about you as a person. And so just to stay on the Todd's topic, were the other two people, was it Jerry and Brett for the lineup?
No, those guys, they came into the band. So it's funny. So it's me, Greg, our drummer, Justin Neuenschwander, who is, he then, once he moved on, because he was a year older than us, and that's when Brett Fredrickson came in. And Jerry had come in and played with us just for a second with maybe at the very tail end of Taz. And then we called our band Killers, after, of course, the Iron Maiden album, which, if now, of course, I know people name their bands after Megadeth song titles, you know, Darkest Hour and these things. So I get it. And so that's when Jerry and Brett came in, and that's why they weren't part. Well, Brett, unfortunately, has passed away. He actually lived here in Phoenix by me. But that's why it was the three of us. And then we hired another guitar player from Nobody's Puppet. That's why I'm wearing his t-shirt. I think it's
there you go.
Pretty freaking baller shirt and band name. But anyway, Tim, and his band is up by Minneapolis. And then we had another friend of ours, Sean Williams. And the funny thing is, his mom was a classmate with me and Greg in school. And then we discovered her son, who's freaking killer, man. I mean, great, just shredding kick ass. He's got his Jackson guitar, you know. So it was funny that we all had Jackson guitars. We had 3 Jacksons on stage in Jackson at the Jackson County Fair.
And so you're from Jackson, yeah.
I definitely had to send that one upstream to Jackson and go, look at how freaking metal this is. This is cool, you know.
I have one more question about that before we go back to talking about the Minnesota thing. So Greg Handevitt, he went with you to when you moved in '83 to Los Angeles, but you also had 2 other friends, Brad and Brent, that moved too, and they only stayed there for a couple of weeks, and they're like, "We're out of here, dude."
They did, yeah. They realized very quickly this was not for them, and you know, in fact, I remember there was a moment, probably by, you know, I'd only been there a month, you know, and I'm walking down Hollywood Boulevard, just going, "Oh my God, what in the hell what is this? This is like LA does not look like it did on TV when I was watching like Chips and Charlie's Angels and, you know, all the cool TV shows, you know." Now it was a dirty city. I mean, Hollywood Boulevard was like pimps and hookers and Hare Krishnas, and it was shitty, man. It was really dirty and disgusting, and they've cleaned it up a lot since then. Yeah. And I'm just walking down the street just going, "Oh my God, this is it, huh?" And I wasn't going to go home because my brother was taking over the family farm, and I was not going to be a farmer. Yeah. And I wasn't going to go to college and, you know, get like a professional degree. So I was like, this is it, you know, here I am. And And that's why, again, I'm thankful for Dave. Dave knew his way around the city. He'd been on his own since he was 16. He had a very different life than mine growing up. And I appreciated that he was tough. He took no shit. He'd fight anybody at any, for me, for anybody. And he always had my back, and that's, those obviously different days back then, but we were all in it together. And again, I came from, look, I was freaking definitely way upper middle class, the farmers, as I look back on it, and I knew it at the time. Our family did very well financially. So for me to jump off that perch down into the bowels of Hollywood and go, all right, I'm going to eat freaking top ramen and, mac and cheese and be homeless and live in my car until we can get this Megadeth thing off the ground. I committed, I was in, and that's, I think probably those are maybe some of the bigger controversies is like, hey man, the share and like, and all for one for all, which we definitely had in the beginning, but as you go on and managers get involved, and we had a manager in the late 90s who pulled the Divide and Conquer with Megadeth, on the Risk album.
I won't mention his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Yeah. And that changed. Look, it ruined the lineup. Marty Friedman quit. That got shitty, and it never has really ever been the same ever since, and that's unfortunate. But, again, I'm trying not to hold a grudge over it. I'm trying to, get better, not bitter over it. And that's why for me to go back in time and revisit the classic early days that, they weren't always easy.
No.
I just put a post up on my Facebook today. I got this little thing called the Killing Chronicles, because I got little 5 days. I'm going to like some little snippets about, back in that day. And then next week, Jeff Young is going to take over and do some stuff. And so far, so good. So we can kind of speak to the spirit of those days. And especially on those records, because that, again, that story hasn't been told so much yet, and it's a lot of great history. And what I find interesting is how many young people are excited about that history, guys our age, we've kind of heard it a bit. We've kind of grown up with the big four and everything, but there's a lot of young, metal fans coming up that this is like history to them. So they get to experience it and be a part of it.
Going back to the Minnesota thing, because I've got a lot to talk about with Jeff Young. He's a wicked guitar player.
Yeah.
I'm going to assume that you didn't like the climate because you live is it Arizona now?
I do, but it was very refreshing. I love, except for the flies, they asked me to be a judge at the barbecue contest, which was really awesome. And, there's flies. There was no mosquitoes back there though, because it got a little colder at night, but I love the climate. The crops look great. There was plenty, it just, everything looked wonderful back there. It was like really blue skies, green fields and green acres, if you will, and it's nice to see the farmers are thriving. There's probably 20 years. My brother has since passed on, but there's about 20. Yeah, there's about 20 years in there where my brother, when he was running the farm after my dad had passed, it was hard going. It's a lot of hard work and, of course, a lot of risk and expense and everything. And, grain prices weren't doing that well. And so it's nice to see that the farmers having a good windfall and doing well. That's not an easy life. It's a lot of work. And a lot of long hours. It's kind of like being a musician. I guess it's probably why being a musician is no different than being a farmer. It literally is feast or famine.
Yeah, no, exactly. Were you a hockey fan being from Minnesota?
My dad wasn't a sports guy. So I learned most of my sports from other buddies in school, and a lot of the outdoor stuff like shooting and hunting and snowmobiling and a lot of the outdoor stuff that I learned from another neighbor friend, and I think that's what's cool back there is that everybody pulls together and just the camaraderie of the community is so cool. And it's still like that at what somebody was telling me about how somebody's wife got sick and, all these neighbors rallied around and they help. And that's what you do back there in that community. And I take that for granted sometimes living in a bigger city. I will say this though, Arizona is kind of where the Midwest, when they retire or they snowbird, they come here. So that's probably why this always felt so nice here in Arizona, because these are my people. This is my tribe here.
Well, being Canadian, I had to ask you the hockey question. I do have a curveball for you, being from Minnesota.
Sure. Yeah.
When you were coming up, were you aware of Prince and the Minneapolis sound and that movement as you were coming up with music before you moved to LA?
I knew only a little about it because again, I graduated in 1983. Purple Rain came out in like what, 84,
Okay.
something like that. So Prince was not a big sensation. That was after I'd moved to LA that he became the big sensation. And I did know that, my future was in California. In fact, I remember very clearly rehearsing in a building on our farm because my band's all Taz. We always rehearsed out on the farm, on my farm, because we had the room for it. And my dad was very supportive with, giving us a building to go make noise out there. And I remember, Van Halen was, they came out in 78. And by like 80, 81, that scene was starting to take off, largely driven by Van Halen. But, then Ozzy was getting his musicians for his new solo band, Post Sabbath, of course, out there. Then Motley Crue came on the scene. So, it seemed like to me, everything was happening out in California,
Yeah.
So I remember clearly going, I got to get to LA. That's where it's happening. I'm not going to Nashville. I'm not going to New York. I'm going to LA. And so my mind was made up probably by the time I was a sophomore in high school that I was, my future was out in LA.
I read an article. You used to have a column. I don't remember if it was Guitar Player or Guitar World, going back a number of years, but you were writing about, it always stuck with me. You'd said that, look, if you're going to invest in equipment, get good equipment. And It was interesting to me that I was reading your book, of course, everyone. I got mine off Amazon. And actually, there's a second book, too, from what I understand.
There is More Life with Death.
Yes. In your book, you got that from your dad. Your dad sounds pretty awesome, the way he was supportive of you and your music.
Well, dude, so here's the story. So right here, so this PV T40 bass, right, which was the very first basses and guitars. So PV, they made the T60 guitar, the T40 bass, right? So I saw this. We went on a family vacation to Florida, and we went to Atlanta and Nashville. And I remember stopping into this music store, and I saw one of these. And I actually bought this down the street like a few months ago. It's an 81, and I bought it for like $6.99, I think, out the door, right? And it's freaking killer, man. I just love it. But at the time, this bass was $240. It had just come out. I remember seeing Ross Valerie from Journey was playing one. And I remember I picked it up and I saw it and I was getting excited about it. And my dad asked me, he goes, you like it? I said, I do. He goes, is that the bass you really want? And I said, well, the one I really want is this BC Rich Mockingbird. And he said, well, how much is that one? And I said, that's $900, thinking he'd be pissed. And he surprised me, as you read in the book. He goes, well, if you buy this one for $240, you're still going to want that one for $900. So let's just go get you the one for $900 because that you'll forget about this bass. This really isn't the one you want right now. You want that one. And so he told me, he said, you're better off spending more to get what you really want than buying twice. In other words, buying this one and then buying that one anyway. Now I'd be
so true. That's
$1,200, $1,300 into the deal. Yeah. So I was really, and I still try to have that approach now, that it's like, don't make it about the money because it's only money and you can make more. And have an abundant mindset rather than a lack mindset. And, again, obviously don't swipe your credit card and buy things you just literally can't afford. But if it's within a couple of bucks, spend a couple of bucks more and really get what you want. You'll enjoy it. The experience will be better. And especially when these ultimately become a work tool, for us to make a living with, for sure, it's the better way to go. And so the irony that I bought that, I moved to LA 2 years later or so, 3 years later. And I meet Dave. He's got his BC Rich bitch that he had with Metallica. So instantly, that's kind of a cool connection. Kerry King from Slayer plays with us a little later that year. He's a major BC Rich guy, right?
Yeah.
Some of his BC Riches. And then literally about, I don't know, 6 months later, Gar Samuelson joins the band. He's the general manager of BC Rich. So BC Rich was meant to be, right? So, again, in hindsight, this all makes sense, but at the time when you're going through it, it's, you're like, so thank goodness, Pop said, hey, let's spend a little more money and get you the right tool for the job,
Yeah, and the PA and the rehearsal space. And it's like, man, that's a cool dad.
He told me later, he said, he goes, when I was probably in my later teens before I left home, he said, I started to pull you back from the farm work, because there's a lot of things, backing a tractor up to a trailer, you could pinch your fingers, get your hair caught in a PTO on a tractor and freaking scalp yourself,
Yeah.
And so he goes, we had an indoor swimming pool. We had a lot of land to mow the grass. He just said, you do those jobs. You know what I mean? Someone's got to do them. You do those. We'll do all the other stuff over here. And he didn't let me out of, working, doing chores and doing stuff. But it's like he told me, he said, he goes, I knew your hands were valuable, and that you're keeping your look and keeping that together. As much as he didn't understand music, he certainly understood business, and he knew that, to some degree, this is the product, and these are the means by which it happens. And I mean, I never went skiing. I didn't do any of that stuff growing up. I still have never skied, because there was always a gig coming up and I didn't want to break a leg or break an arm. And, to me, that stuff, whatever with all, I didn't care about that. I just wanted to play gigs with my band, the Taz and, and Killers and my other bands. So, and I'm still like that, I'm still like, it's wake up and like, all right, what song are we working on today? Or, what interview are we doing? This is just, we're wired this way, this is what we do.
So for all the bass players out there, when you were building your foundation on the bass in Minnesota, how did it start? Like, did you take formal lessons or were you just jamming, learning riffs? Were you just doing exercises with a metronome? How did that start for you?
Good question. So fortunately, I had learned how to play piano on my mother. She had a Wurlitzer organ, so I took lessons from the church organist in the area. So that taught me how to read and write, read music, right, to formally learn treble clef, bass clef, and all that stuff. So then I took up the tenor saxophone and orchestra band in 5th grade. So I understood how to read music. Playing in the orchestra band, I understood how to be a member amongst members, the flute or the shredders and the tubas play the big notes, and I was sat somewhere in the middle, right? So by the time I, got into rock and roll and I got a bass at age 11, I could already read music. So I got the bass, I bought a Mel Bay electric bass volume 1 and 2 book, and I literally sat in the basement and I just sat and I would just practice, playing a C, major scale, right? And just kind of learning how to, like 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and, learning where to put my hand, and that's why I've always played like that. I've always kind of had this C grip, like this rather than like this, I've always had this kind of C grip so that I can play up on the fingertips, because that was how I was sort of taught from those books.
No, that's good.
Yeah. The less skin that touches the string, the cleaner the note, the more precise the sounds. That's why my playing has always been really clean. And it's, I don't use a lot of fuzz and distortion and stuff like that. And effects, I want to tell the bass and the amp what I want to hear. I don't want the gear sort of to color my sound. So that's how I started. And then, then it's funny, my brother had a couple friends, so we started our first band together with them. And then I met Greg Handevidt in the hallway. He had just moved into town, and we literally finished each other's sentence about some Kiss topic. And it's like, so, back in that day, bands, well, like even today, but when you discover a band, and Kiss was not a big band at that time. So it's like, dude, about Kiss? Oh my God, frickin', let's hang out, So I'd been playing bass. Greg decided to get a guitar. And so we put our bands together, and, which quickly became Taz. And so that's what I mean, Greg. I mean, we've literally been like childhood friends since like 5th grade, playing in bands, talking about bands and everything that goes with it. So, then playing in bands. And that was what I wanted to do. I didn't want to just be a shredder and sit around in my bedroom and shred. I was just, practicing was a means to get to rehearsal, to get to the stage, to go play. And it's still like that for me today.
I have another interesting curveball I'm going to throw you, but a nice one. I'm friends with John Ricci of Exciter. I grew up in the Ottawa area.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Well, at least I like to think that we're friends. At the very least, we're very strong acquaintainces. I talk to him every now and then and everything, but I've known
Tell
him
John hello. We did the Killing Is My Business. What was that? What was the record that they had out when we did the Killing tour? Do you remember? I can't remember. It had like a axe and slider, a knife. I forgot what it was. Anyway,
so a long time ago, he told me a very funny story about that tour. And he's like, yeah, we played with Megadeth, and I think you guys played in Ottawa. I think it was Ottawa that he was talking about, but he was like, yeah, so like Dave or the Daves were like, oh, come on. I guess you guys had like was it a mobile home or a trailer? Or
they had a mobile home. we had a van or a car, whatever.
Okay.
Whatever vehicle survived the last 3 shows. Yeah.
Or I kind of forget now, but he was invited on whatever vehicle you guys were traveling in. And you were guys, and he's talking, and people were drinking, or whatever, and everyone's being friendly. And he just said, yeah, then the vehicle started like moving, and he's like, they're starting to leave the city. They're getting onto the main highway. And he's like, Dave, I don't know which Dave he was talking to. He's like, I can you drop me off? And I guess you guys just carried on with them or something. And I don't know what
stayed on. You know, I mean, it's funny. I wonder if that might have been the Peace Sells tour, because we did have a motorhome at that time, and we had a sound man who was from Montreal, I believe, and he probably because we were I think we had a motorhome by then, and that's probably when it happened. We probably just had everybody's having drinks, and
well, I can time stamp it for you though, because I said, well, who was the lead guitar player, and he said, I think the guy's name, he was just filling in. His name was like Mike Albert or something.
God, so that was the Killing Is My Business tour. So
yeah. Have you ever heard from that guy again, or is he just
from John or Mike Albert?
Mike Albert. I'll say John for you though.
Please do. Yes,
I will.
Please tell him hello. No, Mike and I chat. We actually talked by phone last year. We text. No, we're in touch, and he plays great. He in fact, he looks great. He plays great. He's always busy gigging with various things. So yeah, he's in fact, I would say he's probably has a much more current sound now than he did when we did the Killing Is My Business. I mean, he was a little older than us, and I remember seeing at Gar's house up in Pasadena. We're looking at the tour on paper. We're going to lose like 10 grand just before we even left the house. And Mike's like, you guys are crazy. It's like, if you're going to lose 10 on paper, you're going to lose 20. We're like, whatever, we'll figure it out, and he's like, as long as I get paid, because he was just kind of a side man, for the thing. But he went along with it, and they were just fun experiences. And most of it ended up on my dad's credit card. So we had to somehow pay that off when we got home. But because I never did hit my parents up. I never hit my parents up for any money. I mean, they covered a couple things, but I never wanted to be that kid. It was important to me that it's like, hey, man, I made the decision to leave home. I'm gonna figure this out. So we paid our own bills.
So I'm going to switch over more to a technical question for you. Playing metal, a lot of people don't understand, especially if you got 2 guitar players that are, have a lot of overdrive distortion. You have a very distinct bass tone. And did it take time for you guys to understand about like EQing? And I know when I played in bands, I always hated when the other guitar player had his mid-range cranked up, and it's like, dude, you can't do that. We have to kind of. How did you guys go through that process of you getting your EQ on the bass where it pops out, and the other 2 guitar players are balanced with their rhythm tones?
Well, I'm really lucky because I guess growing up on the farm, I had a lot of room. First, we rehearsed in the basement, then it was out, and my dad actually gave us a shed that we just converted. He insulated it, put some big heaters and stuff in there for the winter so we could rehearse, And so I was the guy that bought the PA. My dad helped me buy a big PA system. So I started to understand crossovers, and how PAs work, right? So there's the lows, the mids, the highs, and, biamping and triamping and all these different things. And back in the probably early 80s, bass players started to investigate biamping and even triamping their bass rigs, right? So basically it was like a PA. So I got to really, and even in shop class, I built 4 of these JBL. It's the single scoop bins. I don't know if that's the 4530 or the 4560. So I built. I think I had one, so I built 3 more, right? And I think I seem to remember like I can't remember if I took those out to LA with me, but I remember I took my PA out to LA with me. So when we first started with Megadeth, I was basically using my PA, right, that I had from Minnesota, which was pretty friggin' huge and had a lot of power, and so that was my bass amp. And you know what we discovered, you know, I bought a couple of Marshall, I think they were the Marshall Major 200-watt heads, and then they had these. It was a bass amp, so it may not have been the Major, but it was a 200-watt tube head. And then I bought these two Marshall, they were 2x15 cabinets. So they were square, and the speakers were set at a diagonal, right? Not up and down, but like it is a diagonal. So I had a stack of those, and it just didn't sound that good. I mean, Marshall has never been, bass has never been their thing. You know, they're fantastic with guitar amps, obviously. But so what I discovered with the PA thing is that, you know, you get your tone that's really, I don't know if you can even hear this because I got headphones in, but you know, you got your, you know, the bass, even now, it's real clean, because if the low end was down, and I realized after starting to record for a while, when the bass gets right down into the kick drum, you know, like when the kick drum beater hits the head and there's that concussion, that if behind every beat there's a bass note that follows, you know, he provides the concussion, I provide the sort of the cannonball that comes after, right? That has sort of been my visual approach of bass. And, you know, Marshall amps, which is mostly what I've grown up playing with, you know, they're very heavy in the mid-range. And so, you know, if the bass is down here and then the Marshalls are here, I added some of this click up on the top that sort of scooped up around that. So I scoop a lot of my mids out. Like, you know, when I worked at Peavey, working with Harley Peavey was a real treat. You know, you know, him, Jim Marshall, Leo Fender. I mean, they're kind of the three icons of the equipment business, right? And, you know, talking about various things, but essentially the California smile is what they call it. If you take a graphic equalizer, right, and which we had with our PA systems, and you can boost or you can cut, right? So, but you put it in the middle. If you looked at my tone, it's basically a California smile where bass is boosted, treble's boosted, and the mids are cut in the middle, because that's where the Marshalls live, right? That's where the guitars are. So if you sort of looked at it visually, that's what my tone looks like. It's a lot of bottom, scooped mids, a lot of curve up, and a nice point on the top. And that probably is because I had those experiences with the PA. Now, if you think of like an Ampeg SVT is usually kind of boosted in the mids, right? That's kind of a feature of that amp. So some of the more modern SVTs, I've learned to work with them because I could kind of get that California smile in there. Yeah. That's what I liked about the Galleon Kruger and the Harkey cabinets. It's why I mostly use the Harkey stuff, because that has that nice scooped mids, but it's got that real sharp point on the top because the aluminum speakers. Yeah. And so that's why that has been most of my go-to sound. And, you know, you develop your own tone within any group you're working with, because, you know, if you just walk in and say, hey, here I am, this is my tone, it's like, well, we need you to work with that, because, you know, you kind of need to form a sound together, you know? And so I think for me, of course, you know, for almost 40 years in Megadeth, that became the setting by which my tone was developed.
So I'm going to ask you a question that has always interested me, and I think it interests a lot of people. I don't know if you've ever been asked this, but so when Megadeth was coming together in the beginning, and it was decided that Mustaine was going to do vocals, back then there weren't a lot of guitar players doing complicated riffs and vocals at the same time. It just was really interesting to me how Hetfield had to step up and do the crazy stuff he was doing in vocals, and same with Dave Mustaine. Like I think that really says something about the two of them. But did Dave have to struggle to really get good at doing both? And you do some, like, you're playing some crazy riffs when you're doing backups too. Like, how did you guys work on that?
Yeah, it's a lot of like this thing, right? You start rubbing your tummy and patting your head. Well, you know, as I understand, James was first a singer in the band before he was and you know, Hugh Tanner and then Dave, you know, became the guitar players, and then James. You know, it's pretty interesting because we've kind of watched James Hetfield learn how to play guitar growing up right in front of our eyes, right? And starting with the earliest stuff. And then, of course, once Dave wasn't there, he became the primary guitar player, and just how good he's gotten. And of course, the riffs, and I mean, the right hand of doom on all those riffs and stuff. And for Dave, while he was in Metallica, my understanding was that he was like the front man. He would talk in between the songs. He was kind of the entertainer. But James was the singer, right? So there's this interesting dynamic there. But so fast forward, now we're in Megadeth. We were auditioning singers because we were at this point probably going to be a 5-piece. And the final straw was on New Year's Eve of '83 and '84. We were rehearsing downtown at our rehearsal spot, and the singer didn't show up, flaked out. So Dave, out of frustration, I seem to think it was Chosen Ones. And he had the lyrics, and he just pinned it on the wall. And he stood up, and he just took the mic, and we played through the song, and he sang, and he almost passed out.
Didn't know how to breathe.
He was trying to sing and play. I didn't know that, wasn't thinking about breathing.
Yeah.
And I stood there and I went, dude, that was fucking awesome. And he looked at me like I was out. He goes, really? I said, dude, come on. That was fucking awesome. I said, you're writing this shit. Who's going to sing this stuff? Like, think of how many singers we've tried to get to sing this stuff. They don't get it. This was a new painting. This is something the world had never seen before. And, for me, and I'd say even for Greg Handovik, because we just talked about this last week, and when we got to LA and we met Dave, we were like, this is exactly what we want to do. This is it. This is Iron Maiden next level. This is Def Leppard next level. This is Diamond Head and Motorhead and Venom, like next level. You know what I mean? We were like, fuck yeah, this is it. This is the one. So that's why, to find, and Kerry King, Kerry walked in and just would play these riffs note for note. Dave would play them to him once and he'd just play them right back. Like, geez. So it's like, these were there was a small group of people who really got and understood not just the notes, but the heart. Your hair's a certain way, you wear the right shirt, you got the BC Rich guitar. You know what I mean? You're just a soldier who walks in ready to do this. No, go ahead. Good.
I was going to tell you, many years ago, I remember learning the song Holy Wars for a band I played in many years ago.
Right.
And when I learned the song, the first thing I could think of was like, how the hell does Dave Mustaine play this and do the vocals?
Right. Well, yeah. So it's. I had an interesting moment. Jason Newsted left Metallica.
Yeah.
A call was made to Dave about me being on a short list, to which he gave his blessing and even called me and told me. I never did get the call for Metallica, so that's just leave that there. But I've been dear friends with those guys, still am. And, I thought, well, I don't know if I'll get the call. Probably not likely. There's a gazillion other bass players. And we had just recorded The World Needs a Hero. We just signed a big record deal. Megadeth was my band. You know what I mean? So it was fun to entertain it for a minute, but, obviously they found the right guy, in Robert. But I sat down for the first time since probably Kill 'Em All came out, because I love Kill 'Em All, because I love No Life Till Leather, man. So to me, I like Kill 'Em All. It's the sort of the extension of No Life Till Leather. I can play most of the riffs on guitar. I like it. It's just as a fan, and I sat down and thought, well, let me play through a couple of Metallica songs, and it was stuff off the Black Album, which is not the more complex stuff, in my opinion, at least side A, right? And that was the first time it really hit me how different James lays his vocal phrasings over top of his riffs versus what I'd grown up with in Megadeth, and how Dave had laid his vocal phrasings over his riffs.
Yeah.
And I kind of took it for granted because I thought they would be more similar, and they're not. There couldn't be two more different approaches to it. And I guess that's what makes the bands sound like they do. They're so different. And I think probably the first time I really saw that, I'll say genius, because it was very clever, is in Dave's writing, is when we were in Indigo, I think we're at Indigo Ranch, in recording Killing Is My Business. And he went in to go sing Killing Is My Business, because we'd played the music, but Dave would never sing at rehearsal. He still doesn't. He doesn't like rehearsing vocals, right?
Mhm.
And I'd always have to push him, like, hey, can we practice the vocals so we can at least get the background, you know? So it's just his thing. And so the first time I think I ever heard the Killing Is My Business vocal melody was in the studio when we were cutting the record. And, you know, he's in there singing that melody, and he did what Axl would later do, which is sing the vocal melody and then add a low, an octave lower, and sort of sing the same thing together. People were not doing that back then. That was a very kind of unique approach of doubling the vocal. But then when it came to the chorus, to sing that, my business, and that's good. I'm like, that is like the most melodic assassination song I've ever heard in my life, because the lyric, it's witty, it's a clever lyric. It's not a mean lyric, but to sing that melody, especially over that chord change, I was like, man, this is really freaking cool what we're doing here,
Oh,
and this was next level. Nobody was doing this. And so that's, again, always appreciative for the moments that have happened.
Yeah. When you mentioned about you got the short call there for Metallica, I wanted to ask you, have you read Alex Skolnick's book?
I haven't read his book. I should read it.
It's really good. There's a funny part in it.
I'm sure it is.
At that time, because I guess they were rehearsing in the same building, I guess where Metallica was auditioning bass players in '86. Okay. After he said, he just talks about how all of a sudden their bass player Greg just disappeared for 2 weeks, and they couldn't figure out where he was. And Alex and Eric kept calling him, going like, "Where are you?" And little did they know he was working on his learning Metallica songs, and I guess he had an audition with them or anything. He just has a different sense of humor, but I thought that was really funny. But
well, all of it, it's more than just playing the notes. And again, Trujillo's a good hang. I think he and Kirk are friends, snowboard buddies or surfer buddies, you know what I mean? And that's just as much as anything, especially at that point. It's like, okay, anybody who's going to walk in here is going to know how to play the notes. Okay. It's just, can we hang with the guy? I mean, we've certainly had our lineup changes in Megadeth over the years. And at some point it's like, okay, the guy can play, he looks cool. Like, is he a dick? Can we live with this guy on the road? Is he got some quirky, weird thing that we're going to find out about later that we're not going to want to deal with? So that's it as much as anything. And, so, and at some point, just stability, just creating stability so that, the bigger picture can carry on. So again, and again, it all played out the way it was supposed to. I did got to do Megadeth and everything else that we did. So,
so moving along, then Jeff Young comes in the band, and I wanted to talk with Jeff because you were doing the Kings of Thrash tour with him. You have some dates. I think you're more in California, but I think Jeff's a wicked guitar player, and he was kind of. Did he go to GIT? Was he in with that crowd?
He did. He went to GIT. It's so funny. He and I got along well. We roomed together a lot because back on the So Far So Good So What tour, we were always, band and crew was always shacking up, sharing rooms together, right? So he and I had spent a lot of time together. I did a lot of guitar playing with him. I learned a lot of stuff from him, which was fun. And, so now to connect with him all these years later, we connected through the Nick Menza movie, quite honestly. And I've stayed in touch with him. We even jammed together once at a Ronnie Montrose tribute thing at NAMM a few years ago. So we've not been completely estranged from each other. But to meet on the Nick Menza thing, excuse me, was really good because it said, and we've written some songs together now. Then he called me to come over and jam at the Whiskey for this Big Four tribute. And then that spawned basically the Kings of Thrash. It was like, wow, that was freaking cool. And that was a lot of fun. And, we just realized there's these songs that, this idea had come to me, and it came to me back in last fall, I was at an autograph show in the East Coast, and people were bringing me "Killing Is My Business" records left and right, and it just reminded me, this record needs to be played. It needs to be performed, and you know, same as "So Far So Good So What." To me, those are kind of these two really special records that you know, they never went unnoticed, but you know, they didn't get the big fanfare again, like "Peace Sells" and "Rest in Peace" and all this stuff, right? So to me, I made it my mission, is like, you know what, let's unearth these things and let's bring these out to the stage and play them. And you know, playing with Jeff, he told me, he said after Megadeth, I think he said he intentionally forgot how to play Megadeth songs. He just wanted to move on and just kind of, you know, forget. Because when you come into the band, man, it is a deep dive and it is a heavy compression of, you really have to live that music in and out, day in, day out, all the time, in order to really grasp what it is. And he did that. And then when the gig ended for him, he moved on. But he has been doing, you know, a ton of heavy lifting on this. I mean, he is really working with our singer Chaz and the drummer Fred, you know, to get through this stuff. Even he and Chris Poland working on these things. And again, this is a celebration, not a retaliation. You know, this is a good moment. This is a happy moment to celebrate these songs and these tracks and these records. So we go at it with just fun. It's kind of like putting Taz back together. It's like, wow, wouldn't it be fun if we did that? And we did. You know, it's like, wow, wouldn't it be fun if we went out and played these records? And we're doing it. And so it's meant to be just this celebration and bringing people together. And you know, honestly, that was kind of always my role in Megadeth. It was, you know, Dave always called me the ambassador, and you know, I was always that guy, and I am that guy. So it's like, let me just continue that role in our community and have one of goodwill, you know.
Yeah. Well, I would say about Jeff too is, I mean, he's got wicked technique. He's a really amazing guitar player, but he didn't sound GIT. I nothing against GIT, but he didn't sound like a GIT clone with his phrasing and his licks. He kind of had his own thing going on. It sounded like
he did. I know exactly what you're saying. He's a educated, schooled musician. But he, in fact, you know, now that he's been telling me, and we've been listening through the songs, you know, ripping the tunes apart, learning them, I didn't realize how much stuff he played on. I thought he just kind of came in, banged 4 solos, and that was it. But he played the acoustic on Darkest Hour. He played some acoustic, I think maybe on Mary Jane. There's a bunch of stuff that I did not know that he had played. So he did a lot more work on that record than I thought. And, you know, so he knows that record inside and out. You know, he's also, you know, going through, you know, just learning. He's just really, you know, it's fun to play with him because he's a seriously educated and skilled musician.
Is there, you know, I don't want to be too premature on this. I think you guys are going to do some shows and see how it goes, but you think there might be a chance you might come to Canada?
I think so. I mean, that was the whole thing. Let's pop 4 of these up, see if anybody cares, see if they've, you know, and it seems like everybody, you know, the phone's blown up, you know, people are calling, the promoters are calling, and people want to see it. It's interesting. It's cool, you know, and again, this is a deep dive into a very particular period of the band's history and the catalog that may not get performed elsewhere. So it's like, hey, we'll do it, you know. And again, I think it's we're qualified, you know. Certainly our resume and our pedigree and our history with the group, it's legitimate, you know. And I got to say, it's fun, man. I think it's fun. I got to say, man, Killing Is My Business. There is a lot of deep stuff on that record, and because of the tempos and because of the speed, a lot of that it gets a bit glossed over, and because the production of the record wasn't super great because we didn't have a lot of money to do it at the time. You know, now live going into it, there are some rhythmic figures and some grooves that I think are coming out in the live setting that are so hip. You know, there's this almost funk kind of R&B vibe to some of the rhythms that are so cool. And you know, when we wrote those songs, especially Skull Beneath the Skin and even Looking Down the Cross, you know, these songs were written very slow. You know, the original tempos were you know, they were like, you know, they weren't like, no, they are now. They're like, no, right? So they were really cool. So one of the things we're focusing on is bringing out the, you know, just the kind of the sleazy, slinky, greasy groove that's in there, you know, because it really is in there. And I think our drummer Fred is helping a lot with that. So I think people are going to really enjoy what they're going to hear.
So if we go back to the chronology, after Jeff Young leaves the group, it's well documented about Dimebag Darrell. You guys have approached him. I want to, you know, chat me up on this, humor me. Jeff Waters is from Ottawa. Okay. I don't know Jeff personally. I've had some friends that a friend that played in Annihilator, acquaintances that know him. The dude's a phenom. He's a wicked.
Oh, he's incredible. Yeah.
Love the band. Obviously things worked out with Marty and Nick, because there was a magic there for sure. But how do you think it would have worked out with Jeff? Just, you know,
well, it's funny. You know, it's funny when we were rehearsing, breaking Marty in, you know, to get before we recorded Rust in Peace. I would listen to Alice in Hell every day in my car, man, driving to rehearsal. I love that record. So we did not know Jeff back then, and Jeff had his reputation, and he is a dear friend of mine. In fact, I helped officiate his wedding. Yeah. And then after we officiated the wedding, he goes, dude, the Backstreet Boys are in town tonight. Want to go see the Backstreet Boys? I go, I'd love to go see the Backstreet Boys. Next thing you know, we got like pit tickets, and we're down in the pit at Planet Hollywood in Las Vegas watching the Backstreet Boys. I'm like, dude, how metal is this? Like a bunch of metal guys watching the Backstreet Boys. So it's like me and Jeff are like, he is the funniest freaking guy. We've had some great times together. And you know, we're both sober guys, and you know, so we can kind of laugh at some of our crazy earlier days. And you know, he admits, you know, he was pretty headstrong and running his band, but he did a good job. I mean, Annihilator made great records, and they're kind of, in my opinion, in the way Sepultura is, you know, South America's thrash icons, you know, Annihilator carries the torch for Canada, in my opinion.
I think it would have been, I think it would have been.
He's great. But then the problem is we wouldn't have had any more Annihilator, and that would have sucked, you know. And I mean, look, there's a woman that I was dating, and she introduced me. She was from Fort Worth, and she introduced me to Pantera when we were down there in '88. And we got, you know, drank a bunch, got super hammered, and you know, those guys were super fun. Phil that's the power metal record, and Dime told me, he goes, man, Dad, P-Cells changed my life, man, you know, and I was kind of brushed it off like, oh man, thanks. He goes, no, man, like, listen to me, man, P-Cells changed my life. Like, that was the record. And he was very sincere. They invited me up on stage the next night to jam with them at this club that they played there. The place was packed. And I just jumped up and played P-Cells with them, you know. So we had this friendship, and that was why when the list of guitar players came up, I said, well, look, I was just with, and he was Diamond Darrell then, right? This was before the Cowboys from Hell, and I said, look, I was just with Darrell, his brother Beanie, and you know, so we called, you know, I said, hey, Dave, here's his number, give him a call. So Dave, I'll never forget, we're sitting in my apartment, he called him up and had the talk, and I was like, all right, how did it go? And he's like, well, he said, you know, with him comes his brother, and you know, we don't need a drummer. So that kind of was a non-starter. And again, you look at it, and it's like there wouldn't have been a Pantera. I mean, they wouldn't have made Cowboys from Hell. So it all laid out the way it was supposed to. And of course, Marty was the perfect fit. The funny thing about Marty is we were recording some demos in December of 1989. We were at the EMI Music Publishing Studio in Hollywood, right across the street from Tower Records, is where our manager, Ron Lafitte, that's where his office was, in the Littman Kahane. He worked for manager Littman and Kahane at the time. And we were up there, and Chris Poland was sitting in, just cutting some solos for us. And me and Dave were just kind of going, well, fuck it, I guess we're just going to go in and do the next album, Rust in Peace, the same way we did So Far So Good, So What? It'll be, you know, me, Dave, and Chuck, and then Jeff will join. And this wanted to be me, Dave, and Nick, and I don't know, we'll figure out a guitar player later. You know, we thought we were going to cut Rust in Peace as a 3-piece. And we literally went down to Ron's office a couple floors below, and it was at night. It was after hours, and we saw the Cacophony and Dragon's Kiss, Marty Friedman records laying on his desk, and we're like, "Who's this guy?" Yeah. And Ron was like, he goes, "I've been telling you, this guy wants to do an audition," and we were like, me and Dave were like, "This is that guy from Hawaii, right? From Man Hawaii, Pit and the Pendulum," and he said, "Yeah." And so, well, fuck it, we got nothing to lose. We tried 10 other guys that didn't work. Bring him in, and and Marty came in, and probably the best thing Marty did is he hired a guitar tech to come in, set all his shit up so Marty could just walk in like a pro, pick up his guitar, and just start playing.
Yeah.
And Marty didn't have the money. Marty was broke as broke, and he didn't have a dime to his name, but he spent the money where it needed to be spent to dress to impress, and he walked in, and we were like, this again, he's got the right heart. He thinks like a big time rock star. You know what I mean? He thinks bigger than the normal guy, and that's why he got help. That was a big part of how he got the gig.
Well, as a young guitar player and a huge fan of Megadeth, I remember that when all that went down and Marty got the gig, but I was already a fan of Cacophony, and I was like, that makes sense. It totally makes sense for him to be a Megadeth.
It was perfect, and Marty was a cool guy, probably in the same way Trujillo got the gig in Metallica because he's just a cool guy and he can hang. Marty was like that. He's just a cool guy who can hang. You know what I mean? He was cool. He told me too, he said, "Man, it's been a lot of work being a solo guitar player. I'm glad to just be at home in a band where I don't have to do all the work, and I can just." So for a decade, that was cool by him. And then at the end of that decade, he said, "I'm going to go be a solo artist again." So, it was fine. It was all as it was supposed to be.
I have a question about Marty, kind of an interesting one. I was a big fan of his playing. The guy's a godly guitar player.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I had his instructional videos. I read all his columns in the guitar magazines.
Right.
And he really seemed to know what he was talking about. And then years later, it was in the 90s. And maybe with the advent of grunge and stuff, it was kind of not cool to say you knew theory. And he started saying, like, I don't know theory. I really don't. I'm like, dude, you're Marty Friedman. How is that?
I don't think he does. The funniest thing is, and he might now, I don't know. But the funniest thing is Marty, Marty's got this way of just bending a note, right? So it's like no matter what note he lands on, his ear is so good because he's really a guy. He and I got along good because we were the small town guys, right? And we grew up kind of in small towns, and we liked a lot of the same bands. We always said like Dave and Nick liked Led Zeppelin, and Aerosmith, and me and Marty liked Kiss and Black Sabbath, right? It was like, it's just kind of funny, the band, we liked Mahogany Rush and Frank Marino and Angel and all these bands like Casablanca and stuff. But Marty has this innate way of like any note that he lands on, he's just shredding away, and he can bend a note, and no matter where it is, he can bend up into the note or he can bend down into it and land on it. And it's, as Max Norman would say, musically legal, right? And it's just such a clever thing that he has that. And yet it's funny, so take Tornado of Souls, for instance, right? And, Marty, as best I know, wasn't sitting around with his, charts of chords and, what musically makes sense. He just sat down and started playing, and he'd worked it out, of course, but when he played it, that was just a very magical in the moment solo that landed there, right? Now, we played at Berklee College, or we got invited to go to Berklee College on the Dystopia tour because Steve Bailey's a good friend of mine, and he's the head of the bass department. So there's one of the deans, his son is a huge metalhead, and he formed a Megadeth ensemble at Berklee College, right? So part of the curriculum for the semester is we break down Megadeth songs, and that's your Berklee education, right? Is going through these, right? It's super cool, right? So they bring us in. And Victor Wooten is there because Victor and Steve are good friends, and me and Vic and Steve are buddies. So like it's pretty heavy, right? Kiko's there. It's me, Dave, Kiko. Chris Adler was playing with us at the time. So there's the Megadeth guys, pretty heavy. And then Vic and Steve are there. And so they played their song. I jumped up and played I don't know, tornado with him or something. And afterwards, Kiko is sitting there going through the theory, because Kiko very much knows theory, and is really, Kiko's kind of he's mostly a jazz musician, truth be told. Or at least that's, I could say, I've said his passion is jazz, right? So, and when you learn jazz, you really learn everything about music. You learn harmony, you learn chord changes, you learn inversions, you learn everything. So here's Kiko at Berkeley, just kind of very almost casually going, yes, in this part right here, there's the major, and here comes the minor, and over here he goes to the diminished. And he's just naming these. Victor Wooten's going, holy hell, like this guy's got some depth. Like he could teach at Berkeley. You know what I mean? Like he knows what he's doing. And so for Kiko, it's funny that here he is breaking down the Marty solo with all of the musical terminology and theory behind it. You know, I don't know if Marty knows that. You'd have to ask him. My experience playing with Marty is he was just very intuitive. You know, we'd be sitting in the room and he would just kind of, again, bend a note and sort of, and he'd just go places with it. You're like, holy hell, man, like, where did that come from? You know? And to me, he's just kind of a channel, and that's the beauty of it, is he can play whatever he feels and hears. And, you know, who knows if he knows theory? You'll have to ask him one day.
You know, and that might happen. So another question many people probably want to know, but when you guys were getting going, was there any desire to move up to the Bay Area to be part of the scene, or were you guys always like,
I don't think so. I mean, you know, obviously Dave had lived there before Metallica went to New York, and then from New York he ended up back in LA. So you know, we were based in LA. I mean, it seemed like that's where we were, even though it was, you know, it never felt like home. LA never felt like home to me. I even go back there now and I have memories of stuff, but it was never a welcoming home to me, you know, just the city itself. And I don't know if, you know, Dave grew up down closer to San Diego and, you know, kind of grew up a lot in the Orange County Beach area and stuff. So I don't know if it feels like home to him either. He's lived there a lot over the years, but, you know, the Bay Area was, you know, obviously was home to Dave in Metallica. And I never got the sense that we need to pick up and move to the Bay Area. And maybe because Metallica lived there, Dave didn't want to live there. I don't know, you know. So that I don't ever remember that being a conversation. For whatever reason, we just stayed down in LA.
Are you okay if we do some quick word association? I'll name a Bay Area band and you tell me what you think.
Sure.
Exodus.
Fastest band on the planet.
Testament.
Practice What You Preach was the sweet spot for me. And what was that album? Was that not Book of Souls, but I forgot that record was. I think it was when we
Souls of Black.
Souls of Black, Priest, Megadeth, Testament tour. To me, that was a real coming of age record for them and a period for them. And I will say, I'm impressed with how heavy they are now. In my opinion, they're a band who's gotten better with time.
Death Angel.
Okay. Love Death Angel. In fact, me and Rob just collaborated on a song for the Nick Menza movie soundtrack. And Mark and I have been in Metal Legions together. So all good. My memory of them was me and Dave, Megadeth. I think we were a three-piece. I forget. It doesn't really matter. But we played in the Bay Area. I think we were a three-piece at the time. It was end of November 84. And Death Angel was the opening band. And I remember going out there, and their drummer was 11.
I remember Andy Gallion.
11 years. Yes. And I said to Gar, I said, dude, you got to come out here and see this drummer, dude. This guy is killing it, right? Yeah. And Gar was just laughing. He's just laughing like, these kids are fucking crazy. Like, what are they thinking, you know?
Didn't they open up from,
For
they
who?
opened up for Metallica. I don't know if it was Ruthie's or where it was, but it was like the drummer was in grade 6, so he had to get his homework done and open up for Metallica.
Oh yeah. No, I remember it clearly. Yeah, I mean, literally, the kid was 11 years old. He was playing with Megadeth.
Yeah.
And I think that was their debut show. I think it was their very first show ever. There's a flyer. Me and Mark Osegueda were pinging it back and forth a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I think that was their debut show. Was that year.
Yeah, the great band. I'm I'll always be a big fan of thrash and the Bay Area bands as well as the Big Four.
Totally.
Forbidden.
I'm not as familiar with Forbidden. I mean, obviously I know them, I know of them and everything, but that was not a band that, for whatever reason, I got that familiar with, and that's on me. Shame on me.
Yeah, I saw an interview with Glenn Alvali where he said he auditioned for Megadeth and he totally blew it. Wicked player.
He did. I can't even remember the audition, but I do remember that. But everybody got along great too, and everybody was cool, and there was never any vibes or weird shit. And that was one thing that was cool in the Bay Area because we were all of the thrash thing. Whereas like down in LA, it's Slayer, Megadeth. We kind of only became friends with Slayer just because Kerry was in the band, and I think the Slayer guys weren't that happy about that because they thought, shit, the band might break up. So. Yeah. And then Dark Angel, Jim from Dark Angel played with us. Mm-hmm. There was Agent Steel, Abattoir, you know what I mean? So there was a different flavor of that there, whereas in the Bay Area, everybody was full on fucking thrash or die.
Yeah. Vio-lence.
I'm so glad to see them playing again. Phil Demmel is a dear friend.
Yeah.
And I'm happy for him that came back around.
Yeah, and especially Sean was not in good health a few years ago, and it's really nice to see him.
Yeah.
Machine Head.
They are. I remember they opened for us on a tour. I remember at the convention center in Tucson, and I remember we went in, we met the guys, and I guess that was maybe when Logan Mader was playing in the band.
Okay.
And meeting Rob, and I remember we said to him, we said, dude, Deep Purple, Machine Head, awesome name. He said, oh, thank you. So, and then we said, like Deep Purple. And he's like, huh? Like, Deep Purple, Machine Head, the album. And he didn't know. He didn't have any idea. And at that moment, I realized the young generation coming up did not reference things from what we were growing up. I mean, Deep Purple, was, I guess, a staple, of course, of our generation. But even for me, besides Smoke on the Water, Deep Purple records were not something I listened to. So here I am talking to Rob Flynn, who's much younger than me, and he's like, looking at me like, what the hell are you talking about? It's like old man music, you know what I mean? So, but yeah, they were great, man, and super heavy, a great vibe. And, part of a new generation, because I think that was on the Cryptic Writings tour. So that would have been either Euthanasia or Cryptic. So mid to late 90s, they really drove, they sailed the flag for that next generation coming up.
I have to say, as a Vio-lence fan, when Phil joined Machine Head, I was just like, yes, this is awesome.
Yeah, I agree.
Unfortunately, I think the relationship is a bit strained now, but we won't get into it this time. Maybe down the road, we could do this again if you're available. But I have a theory about why a lot of bands don't work out, and it's a clash of personalities. And there's different classifications I've developed for different people in bands and everything. Like, you always struck me as the type of guy who's even keel. Like, you're well spoken. You can get along with everybody. You have some type A tendencies, and you can put your foot down when you have to. Where we were talking about when I said, like, how do you think Jeff Waters would have done in Annihilator? In Megadeth. It would have been interesting to see the music you guys would have came up with. But him and Dave Mustaine seem to be very, very type A. It would have been very interesting to see how that would have panned out.
Well, I'll give you an example. Mike Portnoy is a dear friend of mine. We do a lot of stuff, Metal Legions. He played in Hail with me. And he called me when the Megadeth drum position was open. And he called me and he said, hey, man, I'd be remiss if I didn't throw my name in the hat. I said, Mike, I love you. Megadeth good enough to know you wouldn't last by the first chorus of Symphony of Destruction. You and Dave would be in a fight and the band would be over. And he said, I know, but I still had to offer. And, the funny thing is because Mike, Mike is the leader of the band, you know what I mean? And I said, you can't have two leaders in Megadeth. There's one, and that's it. So
Yeah.
so we laugh about it. It's funny because Mike loves the music. He's a fan, and we're friends. And but it's just like in some bands, it's like no matter how awesome it looks on paper, it's like this is just never going to be a reality. And that's why, to me, I've been in some groups with my other friends who are also famous, and they go, "Oh, super group." It's like, man, we did not build this as a super group, man.
No.
I just called my friends because I know they play well, they have experience, we've worked together, we like each other, and we can play, we can make good music together. That's why we're playing together. These supergroup mindsets is like, oh, let's just on paper put some famous people together, and then we'll go that out and we'll sell tickets because somehow a bunch of names on a marquee will sell tickets. That's never the right way to. It should always be the music first, and then hey, if it sells some tickets and we can make some money, great. But it should always start with the personalities, the music, and
exactly
making that happen first.
No, absolutely. You were a rep for PV, and
right.
I have a question for you.
Okay.
For musicians these days, of course, we have the advent of social media and everything. The advent, it's been around for a while. If someone was like, I really want to get a sponsorship or an endorsement with this company, what would be their best approach? Like try and build a big following on like Instagram, YouTube? Like what advice would you give someone who's like, hey man, I'd really like to, work with this company and kind of look at
there's a saying in that side of the business. Is this person a player of influence? Right? And especially if you're going to have your name on the guitar, right? If you want a signature model. There was a period in the late 2000s, everybody had a signature guitar. It just became the thing. Every guitar manufacturer is, oh, let's get this person to give him a signature model. It's like, to me, in my opinion, you kind of devalue how the specialness of having a signature model, because the idea being if you put this guy's name or woman's name on it, it will sell, right? And we can make money from it. So look, make no mistake, it is a corporate venture to make money, period, right? Yeah. Just like Michael Jordan's name on a tennis shoe, right? So make no mistake about it. And it's the same with a record company. Record companies don't go to see bands that don't put bodies in the building. They go to see groups and artists who have attraction and there's a vibe and there's a thing and they think they can sell records. That's what they want, because, and they want to, I had a manager tell me one time while I was working at PV, he goes, I tell my bands, I am never willing to work harder than you. If you're willing to stay up till 3 a.m. and pounding the pavement and working and doing everything you do, so will I. But if you think I'm going to do all the work, you got the wrong manager, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. So with the endorsement thing, it's the same thing. Companies are looking to align with artists that they feel will be a mutually beneficial partnership to help sell their guitars or their amplifiers or their strings or whatever. So, if you play great, that's great. But, it's more about, are you famous? Are you a player of influence?
So following does matter.
Of course it does. I mean, Joe Satriani is a player of influence, right? People want to play like Joe, right?
Absolutely.
I'll buy his guitar. I'll buy his amp. What strings does he use? Hell, freaking what haircut does he have? I just want to be like Joe Satriani. And I just use that as an example because he's one of those guys. Yngwie's one of those guys. There's people, and those are the superstar rock star guys, and there's levels under that, of course. But, that's the bottom line. Are you a player of influence?
Absolutely. Do you have any tinnitus issues? Any problems with your hearing?
I don't. I'm good with my hearing. Probably because in 1994 on the Euthanasia tour, we got over to the in-ear technology, which was brand new at the time. I think us, Aerosmith, a couple of other artists, we moved over to it very quickly. And that helped a lot because you can, again, you've got, think like we're in earbuds, right? And then you can just kind of turn them up or down, and that helped. It's cymbals and high frequency guitars, things like that. Those are what blow your ears out. So my ears are good.
And was that was that the company you went with at the time, or?
No, I think it was a company called Future Sonics, And he was the first guy doing it. He was always out on the road with us, and again, whatever other artists he had. There's only a few of us, and it was expensive, but we made the move. We spent the money and did it, and I'm glad we did.
I really enjoyed the Lucid. I checked out some of the songs.
Thank you.
I don't even know how to kind of, for me, it was a bit trippy, but in a cool rock way. Maybe it's,
Okay.
I thought that was really, really cool. I really liked the video for Mastronaut.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really like that
All
song.
right.
And I also really liked Dieth. Am I pronouncing the band properly? Your other projects?
Dieth. Yeah, I was making fun of, while we're shooting the video, I was using my Shakespearean voice. I said, one must dieth unto themselves to live again.
Yeah.
Like a sort of, Game of Thrones narrative. And we're like, dieth, that's pretty cool. So that's how we came up with the name.
And now, is there any, do you think there'll be any gigs or anything coming up with that band?
Oh yeah. No, we have some more announcements coming out later this month about it. So no, that thing's already sailing off the runway. Yeah.
In the Hall of the Hanging Serpents, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And one of the members is from Entombed AD.
Yes. Yeah. Guilherme, the guitar player.
Yes.
Yeah.
I always get those bands mixed up because I remember Entombed in the early 90s. They like tuned down to B or something. And back then you're like, how do they sound so heavy? And then there's two incarnations of the band, and then there was Entombed AD, I think.
Right.
But yeah, I'd love to see both bands if you ever come to Canada, for sure.
Yeah.
Do you ever see yourself doing any other types of genres, like ever going into country or anything?
No, I don't. I'm doing what I want to do.
Okay.
I'm a rock guy, man, and rock could be just rock. It could be freaking thrash metal, power metal, death metal, it doesn't have to just be metal, but I'm a rock guy, man. It's what I like everything from Daughtry to Dieth,
Did you ever need to take a break from the bass? Meaning, one of the things I love about Gary Holt, I remember reading an interview with him in like 92, and he's like, dude, when I come off tour, I don't touch the guitar for 3 months. I play basketball. Where the other guys, like maybe Yngwie or Alex Skolnick, it's like, do they ever put the guitar down?
I'm more the Gary Holt type. I come off tour and I will just set the bass down. I'll just, I have a bunch of instruments in my house, and sometimes I walk by them, I'm like, yeah, not today. Then other times I walk by and go, let me pick that thing up. Or I'll sit at my piano and write, and just play and then just try to play for enjoyment, because when you're on tour, you're playing the same songs night after night. You're doing it for the purposes of a performance. And I think probably the thing most of us professionals who are playing for a living all the time in the studio and on the road is you're always trying to just sort of be in touch with the joy of it. I learned that from Rudy Sarzo. He was telling me that at one point in his career, I think after a lot of his big days with Whitesnake and stuff, he said, I just needed to get the joy back into my playing, and just really enjoy it for why I fell and just fall in love with playing. And so he and I have had many conversations about that. It's okay to just go play basketball and go back and play guitar later,
Did you have a favorite hair metal band back in the day that you never told anyone about?
You know what? I love hair metal, man. I really do. I'll listen to Hair Nation, which is our Sirius XM channel. Dokken probably being one of my favorite, and Rat, man. I love. I mean, pound for pound, man. Rat is just fantastic. Of course, I love Steel Panther, those are. Those probably Rat and Dokken are out of that whole genre, are probably two of my favorites for sure.
Last two, and I am putting you on the spot. Who would be in the big five if there was a big five?
Well, I think if you opened that gate at all, you'd have to be big six, because you'd let in Exodus, and then you'd probably let in Overkill. Because you'd have to get a West Coast and East Coast, right? Because I think it starts to go like that. And, Exodus, if there was a big five, it would be Exodus for sure. Because, look, from them came Kirk Hammett. They were staples of the scene up there. I remember Kerry King telling me, like, Tom Hunting's the shit, man. Tom Hunting's the guy. And it's my opinion that after Kerry played with us, he met the Exodus guys. He saw Exodus play. He learned how Tom Hunting played. He went home and made Dave Lombardo play like Tom Hunting. And that's why Slayer got so fast.
Oh, the guy's a monster,
because, right? I mean, those 5 shows Kerry did with us up to the Bay Area opened his eyes to like, wow, this is how it's done. And then he went back to LA and, you know, he carried on away from Megadeth and he carried on with Slayer. But I mean, he whipped Slayer into shape because he had seen, you know, thine eyes had seen the glory of what thrash metal really was from the Bay Area. And that, you know, helped Slayer become Slayer.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Hopefully down the road we could do this again because, you know, I could talk to you forever. I'm going to post all the relevant links for the Lucid and Dieth down in the description box. I just want to thank you again so much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. It's been an honor.
You are welcome. Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it, man.